The mahogany-paneled study smelled faintly of old books, polish, and lilac, her mother's favorite flowers. Emma sat at the far end of the long table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the silence between each breath. Each tick reminding her that her mother was truly gone. Across from her lounged Daniel, her older brother, perfectly tailored in a charcoal suit, his watch glinting under the chandelier. He looked calm, almost smug, as if he already knew what was coming. He tapped his fingers on the table in rhythm with the clock. Impatience written all over his face, the family lawyer, Mr. Harris, cleared his throat and unfolded a thick envelope stamped with their mother's seal. "Your mother, Mrs. Evelyn Stone, left a clear and specific will," he began. "She wanted this to be read with both of you present." Emma felt her pulse quicken. She hadn't come for money. She had come for closure. Her mother had been distant for years, her affection doled out sparingly, while Daniel had basked in endless praise and expensive gifts. Still, a part of Emma had hoped, foolishly, that her mother's final act would show she'd cared for both her children equally. Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses. "To my son, Daniel Stone, I leave the family estate, my investment portfolio, and the majority of my liquid assets." Daniel smirked. He leaned back in his chair and let out a soft whistle. "Well, I can't say I'm surprised," he muttered. Flashing a quick, satisfied glance at Emma. The lawyer continued. "And to my daughter, Emma Stone, I leave ... He paused, squinting at the page as if making sure he read it correctly. "Double quotes ... The wooden box from my study, the one engraved with the initials ES." Emma blinked. "I'm sorry, that's it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Harris nodded solemnly. "That's what's written here." Daniel burst out laughing. The sound was loud, jarring, cruel. "Oh, come on, Emma," he said between chuckles. "Mother gave you a box? What's in it, crayons and childhood drawings? Maybe she thought that's your level." "Daniel," the lawyer warned quietly, but Daniel waved him off. Emma sat still, her face burning. Her chest tightened with humiliation. She could feel Daniel's mocking eyes on her, and the ache in her throat grew heavier. "I don't understand," she murmured. "Why would she—" Her words trailed off as she looked down, trying to steady herself. Daniel stood, adjusting his cufflinks. "Well, I guess some people get legacies," he said smugly, "and others get sentimentality." He gave her a pitying smile that was somehow worse than his laughter. "Don't take it personally, Em. Mom just knew who the capable one was." Emma rose from her chair slowly, her fingers trembling as she accepted the small, aged box from Mr. Harris. It was warm and worn smooth, as if handled countless times. She turned it over. The initials ES were carved neatly on the lid. Her heart ached. She remembered that box faintly. It had always sat on her mother's desk, but she'd never been allowed to touch it. "Is there a key?" she asked. Mr. Harris shook his head. "No key, no note. That's all she left." Daniel was already halfway to the door, humming to himself. "Good luck with your box, little sister," he called over his shoulder. "Maybe you can sell it for kindling." When he was gone, the silence felt heavy again. Emma stood alone in the study, sunlight spilling weakly through the curtains. She ran her fingers across the grain of the wood, feeling something shift inside her, confusion, sorrow, maybe even curiosity. Her mother, for all her coldness, had never been careless. The engraving caught her eye. "What's buried will bloom again." Emma frowned. Was it a message? A memory? Or a final puzzle her mother meant only for her? Clutching the box to her chest, Emma left the mansion without looking back. She didn't know why, but deep down she felt that her mother's last gift, no matter how small, wasn't meaningless. It was just waiting to be understood. The wooden box sat on Emma's kitchen table like a quiet intruder. Its surface caught the soft morning light, revealing delicate carvings of vines curling along its edges. She'd wiped it clean last night, unable to sleep, her mind replaying Daniel's laughter again and again. She told herself to forget it, to move on, but something about the box wouldn't let her. It felt alive, almost humming with an energy that tugged at old memories. Emma poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from it. Tracing the engraved initials with her fingertip, E.S. Evelyn Stone, her mother's name, for the first time in years, she allowed her mind to wander back to her childhood before everything changed. Her mother used to be different then. Emma could still see her, a woman with laughter in her eyes, always painting or arranging flowers, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders. Every Sunday morning they'd sit by the window together with watercolor paints spread out between them. "Remember, sweetheart," her mother used to say, gently guiding Emma's small hand, "art isn't about perfection. It's about feeling." Those were the happiest days of Emma's life. The house had been full of color, the smell of fresh bread, music playing faintly from the radio, and her mother humming as she painted. Daniel was often away at sports camps, so it was just the two of them. They were close in a quiet, secret way that didn't need words, but then came the accident, her father's car crash. Everything changed after that. Emma remembered standing in the hallway, watching as grief hardened her mother's face into something unfamiliar. The paints were packed away, the laughter gone. The house fell silent. Her mother threw herself into managing the family business, clinging to control as if it could replace what she'd lost, and slowly, Daniel became the center of her world. He was older, louder, more ambitious. Their mother saw in him the reflection of their father's drive, or maybe she just needed someone to fill the void. Either way, Emma faded into the background. When she spoke, her mother barely listened. When she painted, her mother called it a nice hobby. Emma had tried to reconnect, she really had. But each time she was met with polite indifference. Birthdays were forgotten, calls unanswered. Her mother visited Daniel's office weekly, but hadn't stepped into Emma's small apartment once. Still, Emma had loved her. No matter how cold things became, she couldn't stop loving her mother. That's what made the will sting so deeply, not the lack of money, but the lack of love it seemed to represent. Emma reached for the box again, holding it closer this time. She turned it in her hands, looking for any hidden compartment, but found none. Then, as she tilted it slightly, something metallic clinked inside. Her pulse quickened, she opened the lid. Beneath the old photograph she'd already seen, one of her as a little girl, holding a paintbrush beside her smiling mother. Something glimmered faintly in the corner seam, a small brass key. Emma froze. How had she missed it before? She picked it up, studying it in the light. It was thin, ornate, with a heart-shaped bow and tiny initials etched on the stem. "E.S. again." "What were you hiding, Mom?" she whispered, then her gaze drifted to the faded engraving inside the lid. "What's buried will bloom again." Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, that gentle tone from years ago, teaching her to paint flowers that grew from the darkest soil. Suddenly, Emma felt a strange certainty. The box wasn't just sentimental. It was intentional, a message. Her mother had left her something she'd buried behind that cold exterior for years. The clue was there. The key was real. And the phrase, "what's buried will bloom again," sounded less like poetry and more like a promise. Emma placed the box and the key carefully in her tote bag. For the first time since the will reading, she felt her heart steady with purpose. She didn't know where the key belonged yet, but she knew this much. Her mother had wanted her to find something, and whatever it was going to change everything. The rain had started again, a soft, steady drizzle that painted the city in muted silver. Emma drove with both hands gripping the wheel, her mother's wooden box and the small brass key resting on the passenger seat beside her. Every few minutes she'd glance at them, as if expecting them to whisper the next step. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for. All she had was a cryptic engraving, "What's buried will bloom again," and the key. But something inside her refused to let it go. Her mother wasn't a sentimental woman. If she'd left Emma this, it had to mean something. Emma parked outside the old family estate, Daniel's estate now. The mansion loomed through the mist, its windows glowing faintly. She knew Daniel wasn't home. He was in New York for a business conference. That gave her time. She hesitated at the gates. It felt wrong to sneak in, but she typed the old security code anyway, her birthday. To her surprise, the gate clicked open. Inside, the garden was overgrown, wild with untended ivy and half-dead roses. Her shoes sank into the soft earth as she walked toward the backyard. Memories flooded back, her mother's laughter, the smell of lavender, the sound of bees buzzing around her flower beds, and then she saw it, the old garden shed. Standing crooked at the far end of the yard, it had always been off limits. As a child, she'd once tried to peek inside, only for her mother to scold her sharply. "That place isn't for you, Emma." Her pulse quickened. Maybe now it was. The door groaned as she pushed it open. Dust swirled in the beam of her flashlight. The air smelled of cedar and something older, like time itself. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with rusty gardening tools, broken pots, and boxes of forgotten things. Emma moved slowly, scanning every corner. Then, near the back, half buried under a stack of faded newspapers, she spotted a small wooden chest, darker in color than the rest, carved with the same swirling vine pattern as her box. Her breath caught. She knelt and brushed off the dust. The chest had a tiny brass keyhole, the same ornate shape as her key. Her hands trembled as she slid the key in. It turned with a soft click, smooth, deliberate, as if it had been waiting for years. Inside lay a stack of envelopes, tied neatly with a blue silk ribbon. On top of them sat a small, leather-bound notebook. The handwriting on the cover stopped Emma cold. Evelyn Stone, her mother's diary. Emma sat down on the dusty floor, heart pounding, and opened the first page. The ink was faded but readable. The first entry was dated the year after her father's death. "I don't know who I am anymore. Daniel has become everything his father wanted, confident, commanding. Emma is quiet, too soft for this world. I love her, but I fear for her. She reminds me too much of who I used to be, gentle, naive, hopeful. And hope doesn't survive in this family." Emma's throat tightened. She turned the pages, reading her mother's slow unraveling, the pressure of managing the business, the manipulations Daniel used to keep her approval, the guilt she carried for neglecting her daughter. And then came an entry that made Emma's hands freeze. "I've seen what Daniel truly is, ruthless. He's been moving my assets, hiding money in his name, lying about the accounts. I can't stop him outright, not without risking everything. But I can protect Emma, quietly." The next few entries described how Evelyn began transferring parts of her fortune, real estate deeds, investment certificates, into Emma's name, hidden where Daniel would never look. Emma flipped through the envelopes beneath the diary. They contained legal documents, signed and notarized, bearing her name. She gasped. The assets weren't small. There were shares in art foundations, trust accounts, and even deeds to land she'd never heard of. Her mother hadn't disinherited her. She'd protected her. Emma sat back, tears blurring her vision. For years, she'd thought her mother didn't love her, that she'd been forgotten. But now, she saw the truth. Her mother had left her everything that mattered, not just money, but the pieces of herself Daniel had never understood. Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance. Emma closed the diary and whispered, "You hid it all from me, didn't you, Mom?" As she rose to her feet, clutching the chest to her chest, she felt the words from the box echo through her mind again. "What's buried will bloom again." And she realized, maybe for the first time in her life, that her mother had never stopped believing in her at all. Emma didn't sleep that night. The discovery in the shed had set her nerves alight, her mind looping between disbelief and awe. She sat at her small kitchen table with her mother's diary open before her, a steaming cup of untouched tea cooling beside it. The rain had stopped, but her heart still thudded like thunder. Every page she turned peeled away, another layer of her mother's life, one she'd never been allowed to see. Evelyn Stone, the woman Emma thought had chosen wealth and image over love, had been quietly fighting her own battle. One entry read, "Daniel's charm hides a dangerous hunger. He's draining the accounts, investing recklessly, pretending it's for the family business. I let him believe I trust him. He doesn't know I've started moving what's left. It's not much, but if Emma ever finds the box, she know where to look." Emma traced the words with trembling fingers. If Emma ever finds the box? Her mother had planned everything, even this moment. She continued reading. "I can't leave her the obvious fortune. Daniel would contest it. twist the law, use my guilt against me. So I'll leave her something only she understand, something buried under the noise. She find it when she's ready to see me again, not as a cold mother, but as the woman who loved her in silence. Tears stung Emma's eyes. She'd spent years mourning a version of her mother that never existed, the unloving one, the absent one. But here, in these fragile pages, was the truth. Her mother hadn't stopped loving her. She'd simply been protecting her the only way she knew how. Emma opened one of the sealed envelopes. Inside was a notarized document titled Transfer of Ownership, a property deed for a small villa on the coast. Listed under Emma Stone. She opened another envelope. This one held certificates for shares in the Stone Art Foundation, the same foundation her mother had once created, but later neglected as her health declined. Then came the biggest shock, a letter addressed directly to her. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, I've already gone. You've probably been hurt by me, by Daniel, by how things appear. I know how unfair it must feel, but appearances were the only weapon I had left. Daniel could see money. He could touch property. But he never saw you. He never understood what truly holds value. The wooden box is your key. Inside the documents you found lies everything I quietly built for you, the art foundation, the villa, and the trust accounts I've transferred. But more than that, Emma, it holds my faith in you. You're the only one I trust to restore what this family lost: compassion, creativity, and heart. Love always, Mom. Emma pressed the letter to her chest and sobbed quietly. The ache that had lived inside her for so many years cracked open, spilling warmth instead of pain. When she finally gathered herself, she knew what she had to do. She made copies of every document, then called Mr. Harris, the lawyer who'd read the will. His voice sounded groggy with sleep when he answered, but it sharpened quickly as she explained what she'd found. Miss Stone, he said after a long pause, these documents are valid and legally binding. If what you're describing is true, then much of your mother's wealth wasn't accounted for in the public will. It's privately yours. Emma exhaled shakily. So, Daniel has no claim? None, he replied. In fact, the Stone Foundation alone gives you control over a significant portion of the family's holdings. Her fingers tightened around the diary. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Her mother had hidden her love in codes and clues. Yes, but she'd also hidden a legacy. One that Daniel couldn't buy, manipulate, or steal. Emma looked out the window. The clouds had parted, revealing a thin line of dawn stretching across the sky. What's buried will bloom again, she whispered, remembering the engraving inside the wooden box, and now she understood. The bloom wasn't money. It was truth. Her mother had planted it long ago, and tonight it had finally come to life. 2 weeks later, Emma stood in the lobby of the Stone Foundation, her mother's once prestigious art institution that had fallen into quiet neglect after Evelyn's passing. The marble floors were scuffed, the air smelled faintly of dust, and the grand portraits on the walls looked tired under their tarnished frames. Yet to Emma, the place pulsed with possibility. She had spent the past days in a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and quiet revelations. The documents her mother left were legitimate, airtight, and legally binding. Emma now owned not only the Stone Art Foundation but also significant shares in their family's investment firm, land holdings, and the coastal villa her mother once loved, but she hadn't told Daniel. Not yet. She wanted to see his face. That moment arrived sooner than expected. Emma was in her small office at the foundation when the glass door burst open. Daniel strode in, his expression thunderous, his phone clutched in one hand. His usual calm arrogance had been replaced with fury. "Emma!" he barked. "What the hell is this?" He threw a stack of printed papers onto her desk, copies of the deeds and financial transfers that had recently been processed. "You're stealing from the estate." Emma met his glare, calm and steady. "I'm not stealing anything, Daniel. These were Mother's arrangements, all legal, all signed by her years ago." "Don't give me that nonsense," he spat, pacing the room. "You, the one she barely spoke to? You expect me to believe she left you the foundation, the villa, and half her holdings? Do you think I'm an idiot?" "No," she said softly. I think you underestimated her. Daniel stopped pacing. His eyes narrowed. You forged something. Or bribed someone. I can still have this overturned. You can try, Emma replied evenly, sliding a document toward him. But you'll lose. The transfers were verified by Mr. Harris and 2 witnesses. Every signature is authentic. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the air conditioner. Then Daniel let out a short, bitter laugh. You think you've won something here? You don't have what it takes to manage all this? You're an art teacher, Emma, a nobody. Mom built an empire, and you'll destroy it within a year. Emma stood slowly. Maybe I will, but at least I'll do it with honesty. Her tone was calm, but her eyes glinted with a quiet strength Daniel had never seen before. Mother didn't want her legacy in your hands because she knew what you are, selfish, greedy, and cruel. You didn't just betray her trust, Daniel. You destroyed it. He stiffened. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but I do, she said, pulling something from her desk drawer, a small USB drive. Mother recorded her final entries on video. Her own voice, her own face. She explained everything. Daniel froze, his anger flickering into something like fear. I've already given a copy to Mr. Harris, Emma continued, and another to the family board. If you try to challenge anything, they'll hear it. Every word she said about your manipulations, your lies, the money you took. The color drained from his face. For the first time, Daniel didn't look powerful. He looked small. You can't. I can, Emma interrupted quietly. And I already have? Silence filled the office. The mighty Daniel Stone, who once mocked her for being weak, now stood cornered, undone by the very woman he'd dismissed his entire life. Finally, he straightened his jacket, trying to salvage his pride. Enjoy your little victory, Emma, he said coldly. But this isn't over. As he stormed out, Emma didn't stop him. She simply exhaled, the tension leaving her body like a heavy fog lifting. When the door closed, she sank back into her chair. Her hands trembled, but her heart felt strangely light. Her mother had prepared her for this, not by teaching her to fight with power, but with patience. And that was something Daniel would never understand. Emma looked out the window at the city, skyline glowing in the afternoon light. It is over, she whispered to herself. And this time it ends on my terms. Spring arrived quietly that year. The city's gray skyline softened with pink blossoms, and for the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she could breathe again. It had been 6 months since the confrontation with Daniel. The chaos had faded into calm lawyers' board meetings. Headlines about the mysterious inheritance shift in the Stone estate. But through it all, Emma had stayed steady, guided by her mother's diary and her own quiet conviction. Now, the Stone Art Foundation was alive again. Sunlight poured through the restored glass roof of the grand hall as guests filtered in artists, journalists, families, and students. Where there had once been dust and silence, now stood vibrant canvases and laughter. Children painted on easels in the courtyard. Musicians played soft strings in the background. And the air smelled faintly of fresh lilac. Her mother's favorite. At the center of it all stood Emma. In a simple pale blue dress, a silver pendant shaped like a key resting against her chest. She'd worn it every day since discovering the brass key, a reminder of the journey that had led her here. The foundation's reopening had been her dream, but it was also her promise to her mother and to herself. She'd use part of her inheritance to fund scholarships for young artists, create free art programs for children, and reopen her mother's long-forgotten gallery wing, now renamed the Evelyn Stone Memorial Hall. As guests admired the exhibits, Mr. Harris approached, smiling warmly. "You've done something extraordinary, Emma," he said. "Your mother would have been proud." Emma smiled softly. "I hope so, I think. I finally understand her now." He nodded. "Love doesn't always show itself the way we want it to. Sometimes it hides, waiting for the right person to uncover it." Before she could reply, the crowd's quiet chatter shifted. Someone was standing hesitantly near the entrance. Emma turned and froze. Daniel. He looked nothing like the man who'd stormed into her office months ago. His sharp arrogance had dulled. His expensive suit seemed too stiff for the humility in his eyes. He held a small bouquet of white lilac, clumsy, almost awkward, as he stepped forward. "I didn't think you'd come," Emma said softly. "I almost didn't," he admitted, glancing around. "But I needed to see it. The foundation. What you've done." He paused, his voice lower now. "You proved me wrong." Emma tilted her head slightly. "About what?" "About Mom? About you?" He swallowed hard, struggling for words. "I used to think she loved me more because I was successful. But I think now she just worried I'd lose my soul chasing everything that doesn't matter. And I did." For a moment, the weight of years, resentment, jealousy, silence hung between them. Then Emma reached out, gently taking the lila from his hand. "She loved us both, Daniel," she said. "Just in different ways. I think she hoped we'd find our way back to each other." Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes glistening. He nodded once, almost gratefully. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "For everything." Emma's expression softened. "Then maybe this is a new start." They stood in silence for a while, watching the crowd move through the hall. A young girl at one of the easels dipped her brush into yellow paint and smiled up at them. "Do you like it?" she asked shyly. Emma smiled. "It's beautiful. You should keep painting. The world needs more color." The little girl beamed and turned back to her canvas. Later, when the guests had gone and the last echoes of music faded, Emma walked to the far end of the hall, where her mother's portrait now hung. Evelyn Stone, dignified yet gentle, gazed down with soft eyes. Beneath the frame, on a pedestal of white marble, sat the old wooden box. Emma placed her hand on it, tracing the engraving one last time. "What's buried will bloom again." A tear slipped down her cheek. "But this time it wasn't from sadness. It bloomed, Mom," she whispered. "Just like you said." Outside, the first evening stars blinked into the sky. The lights of the foundation glowed warm against the night, a quiet symbol of love reborn, not through wealth or power, but through understanding. And as Emma turned to lock up, the faint scent of lilac drifted through the hall, soft, sweet, and familiar, as though Evelyn herself was there, watching her daughter's legacy finally come to life.